Let's do this. Hi, I'm Jaden, or the Story Corner on Instagram, and today I'm going to give you an overview of all the books I read in the first 3 months of 2024. You know, I totally meant to shoot this video in like April, like right after March ended, but life got in the way. It's mid-May now. We're gonna freaking do it. So I started this year with A Big Ship at the End of the Universe by Alex White. Nyla is a race car driver who witnesses a murder of one of her competitors on the track by this mysterious woman in this like creepy ass mask. And after the race, she is framed for said murder, so she goes after the one person that she knows this killer is also after, a woman named Boots. Boots is ex-military, washed up, formerly famous treasure hunter, and she's fallen on bad times, so she is starting to sell fake treasure maps. But it turns out one of the clues in her maps is legit, and it leads to a mythical warship called the Harrow that can cause epic levels of destruction. Both women end up on a smuggler's ship where Boots has a bit of a history with some of the people on there, and now this ragtag crew has to follow the clues to the Harrow in order to keep the ship out of this killer's hands, and also prove Nyla's innocence. This was a pretty okay start to the year. I love the concept of this book, but I ended up finding myself kind of zoning out while listening to the audiobook. The book opened with one of Nyla's races, which I thought was really cool. I often go into books basically blind. I've read the synopsis, but sometimes I haven't absorbed it all. So I was a little disappointed when that was like the only racing scene of Nyla, because I thought that was such a cool concept, and I just wanted more of it. One thing I really did love about this book was the magic system. Each person has their own glyph, which I guess is kind of like a fingerprint but gives you like powers. Some people have the ability to like manipulate. Some people have the ability to manipulate technology while others can create shields. It's a super interesting way to like create this world, and then have Boots, who doesn't have a glyph. She's like 1 in 6 million people who just don't have this ability to like connect to this magic ecosystem through these glyphs. I also just really like the space opera fantasy vibes to it. I think there is a sequel. Will I read it? Probably not, but overall I had a good time, and this was the first great book to start my year with. The next book I listened to this year was So Let Them Burn by Kamala Cole. Any book with dragons I will pick up, so I was super excited about this one. Farron is a child saint who has the ability to communicate with the gods. She is separated from her sister Alara after Alara accidentally forms a bond with a dragon from the Langley Empire, which had previously colonized their island. As the story begins, the character motivations are right there. Farron is trying to figure out how to get her sister back. Alara is bonded to a dragon and a co-writer who she starts to fall for, and Farron is told that the only way to break the bond between her sister and the dragon is to kill her. This was such a big sandbox to play in, but I wish that the book had ultimately dug a little deeper into the emotional strife of the story. With all of the major events and character choices that happen throughout the book, I felt like I was just getting a summary of the events instead of actually living there with the characters. I felt like things would happen off screen, and then I'd get a, oh yeah, this happened by the way. And there was surprisingly few dragons. Came for the dragons and the emotional angst. Didn't get much of either. The book was fine. I had a decently good time. I know there's gonna be a book 2. May or may not read book 2. It just kind of depends if I'm feeling up to it. Next, I read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. This was recommended to me by a friend of mine. I should have read this and watched the movie sooner. Seconds before Earth is destroyed to make way for an intergalactic highway, Arthur is rescued by his friend Ford, who he thought was an out-of-work actor, but who was actually an alien working on updating the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Then they're just having a romp through space with a crazy cast of characters the rest of the time. This book is a classic. It's super fun and just made me snort with laughter. It's one of those stories that's just so absurd and so quotable that there's nothing not to like about it. And that's a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I don't know what else to say about it. It's just a good time. I totally just recorded a ton of stuff without audio, so yay! We're going back 3 books. We're going back 3 books. Next, I read Frey by Rowena Miller. It is book 2 in the Unraveled Kingdom trilogy. This series is about Sophie, a seamstress who can weave charms and magic into the clothing she makes. She gets a commission that could elevate her work and secure her business by working with the noble class, but she is torn between that and the nobleman that she is slowly falling in love with during this secret romance, and the brewing rebellion that her brother is leading. I don't have it, but I do have one of her other books, The Fairy Bargains of Prospect Hill. Also a great time. 10 out of 10 recommend. I read the first book, Torn, last year and absolutely loved it. I first discovered these books while listening to the World Building for Masochists podcast, where Roanna was a host for several years. I feel like I can't talk about this one too much because this is book 2 out of the trilogy, but it is very fun, very French Revolution inspired, and the world building is great. I mean, what else do you expect from somebody who hosted a podcast called World Building for Masochists? I haven't had time to read the final book in the trilogy yet, but I'm planning on doing so later this year. Next, I read Who We Are in Real Life by Victoria Coops. This book follows Darcy and Art. Darcy just moved from a big city to a super small town with her moms, and she's left everything behind. Her friends, her D&D campaign, and her boyfriend, albeit he is very abusive, so honestly a win. And she meets Art, this quiet kid who invites her to join his D&D campaign. Very quickly they find that they have a lot in common and have started to fall for each other, which forces Darcy to confront her boyfriend's emotional and physical abuse. In addition to that, Darcy, Art, and their other friends have decided that they want to start a QSA club at their high school, and because of that they have to face their small town's quiet homophobia and also Art's uber conservative father. This was a pretty quick read for me, but it wasn't particularly memorable, but I did really enjoy Art's novelization of the D&D campaign. Art would take everything that happened during the campaign and write it out, and so that was the in-game chapters, and I really enjoyed how everything that was happening to the player characters was reflecting what was happening in real life. And I didn't find this particularly memorable. When I was writing this out, I had to go back and be like, okay, what happened? How do I talk about this book? Next, I read Lake Lore. I've talked about this several times on my Instagram, so you can see a little bit more in-depth there. It's hard to talk about this book because the book is called Lake Lore. There's a lake called Lake Lore and a character called Lore, so forgive me if I get things confused. This lake is rumored to have this breathable underwater world beneath the surface. Bastian grew up around the lake and accidentally brought Lore into it when he helped rescue Lore from a group of bullies during a school field trip during their childhood. Years later they meet again, but the lake is completely changed and isn't that kind of safe, beautiful, magical underwater world that they remember it as. The lines between the underwater world and real life have begun to blur, and both Bastian and Lore fear that the blurring of these lines will drag the secrets they've hidden to the surface. When people talk about books like painting a picture in your head, I feel like this book really did that. It didn't have a lot happening plot-wise, but the imagery was so beautiful that I was just completely sucked in from the get-go. I also really liked this book's depiction of dyslexia. I'm not somebody who has dyslexia, so having Lore explain their experiences with dyslexia and learning and reading and all of that stuff was super interesting to me, and really was that first time it connected what that must be like. So that was another really interesting part about the book. This was fun. I had a good time. Like I said, the description and the imagery was absolutely beautiful, and this is a book I would 100% recommend. Okay, we're back to where we were before my thing cut out. Next, I listened to The Red Pyramid by Rick Riordan. This is a childhood nostalgia trip for me. This is one of those series that was absolutely monumental to me as a child, and was something that listening to again as an adult, I was just it touched my heart. The funny thing is, I first listened to this book as an audiobook way back in 2010 or whatever. Since then, they have re-recorded the entire series with new narrators. I cannot stand the new narrator who does Sadie. I don't know what it is, but when I got the book from Libby, the narrator who now does Sadie, her British accent is really bad, and even for the other characters who aren't British, she's still in this really bad British accent, and I could not handle it. So I ordered the audiobook CDs from the library, downloaded them onto my computer, and now I just have them on my phone for forever because I'm I can't do this. I got probably 5 hours into the book and I'm nope, I gotta get the original narrators, and it wasn't anywhere online. So that is my story about this book. Next, I read the book The War of Art. It was gifted to me by my manager at work, which is very kind and so appreciated. This book talks about the art of creating things and what can get in the way of that. Very much those inner demons that are no, you're not perfect yet. Don't start. Like, you can't start until everything is perfect. The book talked a lot about how resistance can get in the way of actually creating, and so you should just create things anyways, like especially when your brain is resisting you. My thing with self-help books is that you have to take from it what like resonates with you, and so there was definitely parts of this book that didn't resonate with me. It talked about like mental health a little bit and like how you shouldn't let that get in the way of creating your art, and like, oh, it's all fake. Those parts I'm like, this is very, very outdated, but a lot of the book did resonate with me and like made me push myself to create art even when I wasn't feeling like I was good enough to be creating said art. Parts of it resonated with me, other parts didn't. You take what you can get, right? Next, I read The Battle of the Labyrinth by Rick Riordan. Again, we're on this nostalgia kick. I don't know what else I can say about Percy Jackson that hasn't already been said in like a million other things. I love these books. I don't care that they're meant for middle schoolers. I love these so much, and yeah, I don't know what else there's to say about that. Next, I read The Throne of Fire, also by Rick Riordan. I think out of the Kane Chronicles trilogy, this is my favorite. I have vivid memories of like falling asleep as a kid listening to this audiobook. So this one in particular is like absolutely ingrained in my brain. The next two books I can't talk about because of the Speak Up St. Martin's Press boycott, but one of them was really bad and one of them was really, really good. Next, I read Strange Folk by Ali Dyer. This is another ARC that I received on NetGalley. This book is about Lee, who fled from her small Appalachian town when she was 18, and 20 years later she returns with her 2 children after separating from her husband. And when she returns, she's confronted by the people and the magic she left behind. My very favorite part of the book was how textured this world was. The author did such a great job at creating this like super like visceral backdrop of Craw Valley. It almost made the town itself feel like it was another character in the story. The characters themselves were okay. I think my biggest issue about this book was that when the points of view switched from Lee to her daughter, it felt like there was no distinct character voice. And there should be distinct voices when you're talking about like an adult woman and a 15-year-old girl. They're going to think about the world differently, but I didn't really get that when I was reading. This book was pitched as having a lot of like practical magic vibes, and while I kind of understand, it felt a lot darker than that. It was okay. I honestly don't think I was the target demographic for this book, but I had a good time, and like I said, the texture of the world like really is what drew me in. Next, I listened to You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight by Kaylin Barron. Clarity works as the final girl running a terror experience at this camp where this horror movie was set years and years ago. But during the last weekend of the summer season, her co-workers start to disappear, and the terror becomes very real as Clarity and her girlfriend fight to make it through the night. Even though this is a slasher book, I honestly did not expect that many people to die. I love a good slasher movie. I'm not a big horror fan, but I do love slasher movies for some reason. And I was super, super excited about this, especially because I saw somewhere that it had similar vibes to the Fear Street trilogy, which are some of my favorite movies. The audiobook for this was just under 3 hours, so I think I got through it in like a day or two, and at that point I just like really needed a quick read after having a couple like longer books. This book thoroughly wigged me out. Like, there were some points during the book I was like, oh my god, like I'm really glad I am sitting at work and not like home alone by myself. I think this setup before we actually kind of got a sense of what was going on was my favorite part. Like, just the anticipation of like, oh yeah, our coworkers haven't shown up. That's weird. But then I hit the like halfway point of the book and things got a little maybe my expectations were just like misaligned with the book, but I expected the beats to like hit a little differently and more aligned with like what happens during a slasher movie. Overall, this book was okay. It disappointed me in the second half, but I didn't have a bad time. The last book I read in the first 3 months of 2024 was Icarus by Kay Ancrum. I was super, super lucky to receive a physical ARC of this book, and it is absolutely beautiful. I am obsessed with this cover. It is absolutely gorgeous. Icarus is a reimagining of star-crossed lovers. Icarus, who is an art thief, and Helios, the son of the person Icarus is stealing from. This book was super, super enjoyable and like such a quick read. It read more like long-form poetry than a novel, but I absolutely enjoyed it, and it's unlike anything else I've read all year. The chapters felt like little vignettes into the story, but I feel like every important point in the story happened on the page. I literally cannot describe just how much this book like squeezed my heart. This book is so emotionally driven and impactful, and I literally cannot recommend it enough, especially if you want something that is really quick but will punch you in the gut. This is the book for you. All in all, I finished 15 books in the first 3 months of 2024, so that adds up to 9 audiobooks, 4 ebooks, and 2 physical books. I think my favorite would be one of the books I can't talk about because of the St. Martin Press boycott, but the runner-up to that would be Icarus. Now I have to end the video, and I'm not quite sure how to do that. So check me out on Instagram at the.storycorner, and stay tuned here. At some point I'm planning on doing some really in-depth plot summary deep dives on my favorite bastard lacrosse hockey players. So keep an eye out. Who knows when I'll get around to making that script, so we'll see. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you next time.